Hi everybody, this video is going to be interesting because I'm going to be talking about um, editing tools and the software, the Grammarly's and the Hemingway apps, which obviously are competition for my editing business. So I need to try and present this in a way that is as impartial as I can be. And my intention here is not to run these tools down because I think they do have some real value and I am going to talk about those. But I would also like to the stress where they don't quite live up to what a human editor can do, or even just what you as a human writer can learn to do yourself. So that's my aim for this video, to discuss these kinds of tools with some impartiality. So let's get into this. Let's start with the good. These tools are great for flagging up your bad habits, the ones that you probably don't realize you have until they are highlighted in red on a screen. Things like passive voice or using too many adverbs, really long sentences, too many of those in a row, or too many short sentences, comma splices, commas that aren't necessarily supposed to be there, missing apostrophes, things like that. They are great for flagging those up and say, you've made this mistake, this is an error. And what I think is really good about those is that you can learn to understand what habits you are performing regularly with your writing. Once you know that you do that, you can then, when you start writing again, have a bit more of that awareness and understand what you're doing and what mistakes you're making so that you stop making them, or that you can catch them as you're writing them so it doesn't take quite as long to edit. So those tools are really good for that. I also used to use these tools, particularly the Hemingway app. I used this one a lot when I worked as a marketing copywriter. I did a lot of business writing for tech companies and things like that. And if you have quite jargon-heavy copy, it really helps to run them through this kind of tool because they generally tend to have something that's called a Flesch-Kincaid reading score attached to them, which tells you what age range would understand what you've written. And that's really helpful for business copy because you want to try and make the reading age level as low as possible so that people can understand what you're talking about, even if the topic is quite heavy and jargony. And these were great for that, for flagging up any words that you could switch into something a little bit simpler, for making sure that you use shorter sentences and things like that. They're super ideal for business copy and formal copy, things like that. I'd probably say those are the two really important positives that come along with these tools. And they really are important. This is what I mean. I don't want to sort of go on now and run them down in any way because they're very valuable, and I do think that writers can gain a lot from putting their work into these kinds of tools and using them. I'm not sure that the paid versions are all worth it. I'm going to be honest and say I haven't paid for the full version of Grammarly, so I'm not sure how much extra it offers. I do know it's introduced something recently which is it checks your tone of your writing, which I think again is probably more appropriate for business copy than it is for novel copy, but I'm not sure, I've never tried it. If you want to let me know in the comments if you've tried the pro versions of these and whether you think they're any good, then I'd be happy to hear that. And that's just my opinion on the free versions of these tools at least. Now on to where I think they fall down a little bit in comparison to the editing you can do yourself or to what a human editor can bring to your work. So the main point I would say is that these tools are great for saying, this is passive voice, or you've used an adverb here, this is a comma splice. What they are less good at is telling you when that's okay. Because not all passive voice is bad. Not all adverbs are bad. Of course, you don't want to be using too many of these. Too much passive voice slows your work down. It does add extra words generally. Adverbs aren't always great. You can almost always replace the adverb with just a better word, a better verb. Instead of he ran quickly, just he raced, he rushed, he dashed, etc. But sometimes you have adverbs that are quite helpful. He sighed wistfully or he sighed heavily are two very different things, and that's an important distinction to make. But these tools aren't always very good at helping you distinguish when these errors are not errors. And that's really something that you just pick up the more you read or the more you write and the more you go through your editing. It's really just about tone and rhythm and just the way the story flows. And it's just something that you have to just figure out as you go. And these tools aren't really going to help you understand that. Another point is that I'm pretty sure these tools were designed initially for business copy. So they have these quite rigid rules around grammar and sentence length and structure, etc. And I'm not quite sure that these translate very well into fiction copy. And I'm specifying fiction here as opposed to just novels because they probably do translate better into non-fiction. But in actual fiction, there's more room to play around and sort of break these rules a little bit. And particularly for things like dialogue, where you're getting a character's voice really come through, if you stick too closely to these rigid grammar rules, it can take away a lot of voice. For instance, we make mistakes when we speak out loud. If I don't edit any of this copy right now, I'm probably going to have made some mistakes. And that's human. That's how we speak. We don't speak grammatically correct all of the time, unless I suppose you're part of the royal family or whatever. It's just natural. That's how our speech comes across. So if these errors get flagged up in a tool and you want to make the changes, it can take something away from the dialogue. And the same if it's just in the main body copy as well. It can really take away some of your authorial voice to put a comma in a different place, or to take out the passive voice, things like that. It's a distinction, an important distinction that these tools can't identify. It really is just something you have to figure out on your own, or that really only a human can figure out. I think I'll leave it there because 2 points for, 2 points against is probably about as impartial as I'm going to get on this topic. But I will just add one final thing. So these can work in harmony. You can use a piece of software for this and a human editor. What I would say is probably do the software first, run your work through the tool, make any of those changes that you want to make, and then send it to your editor if you're going to get one. Really probably best not to do it the other way around, because the things I've talked about, the human distinctions that you make, will sort of get thrown out when you start to go through the tool after that. So if you are going to use both, use the tools first and then a human editor. That's all I'm going to say about the topic for now, but I am really keen to hear what you think about this. Have you used any of these tools for your fiction writing or for your non-fiction? Do you find them useful? Have you learnt what your habits are with these tools, and would you pay for the full versions, or if you have, are they much better than the free versions that other people might have tried? I really am keen to know what you think about this, so do leave your comment down below. And until the next video, happy writing!